December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow falls thick over the pine canopy, muffling the distant thunder of artillery. From a frozen ridge near the German border, columns of armor rumble to life. Engines cough black smoke into the bitter morning air as thousands of Wehrmacht and SS troops brace for the surprise attack that Adolf Hitler calls Wacht am Rhein. Watch on the Rhine. At the head of one of these armored spearheads sits Oberst, Colonel, Karl-Heinz Fuchs, a career officer from the 2nd Panzer Division. His face is weathered, his eyes sharp but tired. Inside his command half-track, a map of the Ardennes lies open on his knees, dotted with grease pencil marks showing fuel points, Allied roads, and the path to the Meuse River. "Fuel, Herr Oberst?" his adjutant asks, shivering in his greatcoat. Fuchs glances at the fuel gauge, barely a quarter tank. He knows it's the same story across the entire division. The German plan depends on speed. Tanks bursting through the thin American lines, capturing fuel depots along the way. The offensive's success hinges not on artillery or aircraft, but on gasoline. Without it, even the mighty Panthers and King Tigers are nothing but steel coffins. Fuchs lights a cigarette and exhales into the frosty air. "We will take what we need from the Americans," he says flatly. "If we fail to reach their supply lines, this offensive will die before it begins." At 05:30, the silence breaks. A wall of artillery erupts from the forest, shaking the frozen ground. Shells scream over the treetops and crash into Allied positions. Then, through the smoke, the panzers advance. Fuchs's column pushes west along the Schnee Eifel, headlights dimmed, tracks grinding over snow. Radio chatter fills his headset. Fragments of reports from Kampfgruppe Piper, from the 6th Panzer Army, from fuel-starved units already halting on the road. Hours later, they reach a captured American outpost. Burned jeeps and abandoned rifles litter the road. Fuchs steps down into the snow, inspecting the wreckage of an M4 Sherman, still smoldering. He touches the cold metal, then looks toward the west. "Every mile we drive," he mutters, "is a gamble against the fuel gauge." But for now, the offensive surges forward. American lines buckle under the shock. Villages fall. Entire regiments are thrown into chaos. The dream of reaching Antwerp, of splitting the Allied armies, flickers alive once more in German hearts. Still, deep down, Fuchs knows what they're gambling with. Not courage, not tanks, but the last drops of fuel left in a dying empire. And soon, he will see what real fuel looks like, near Stavelot, Belgium. Dawn breaks over a frozen valley. The low hum of diesel engines echoes through the snow-laden trees as Colonel Fuchs's battle group creeps down a narrow country road. The ground trembles under the weight of Panzer IVs and half-tracks, their crews weary, faces raw from the cold. Fuel drums clatter empty in the back of the convoy. Overnight, several tanks were abandoned along the roadside, their engines starved. Fuchs had ordered them stripped for parts. "We leave nothing for the Americans," he growled. But even he knows. Every kilometer forward drains their lifeline thinner. Then, around 0840, a scout car returns. The driver leaps out, snow-dusting his helmet. "Herr Oberst, depot ahead! American fuel dump, big one!" Fuchs stiffens. His gloved hand tightens on his binoculars. "How far?" 2 kilometers, sir, south of the village, unprotected. I saw trucks, drums, even tankers." The colonel's heart kicks. For days, his radio operators have been intercepting desperate German transmissions. Kein Benzin, keine Bewegung. No fuel, no movement. But here, in this silent Belgian valley, luck has turned. He orders the column forward. Tanks growl through the fog. The first signs of the depot appear through the trees. Long rows of 55-gallon drums glinting under thin morning sun, stacked beside snow-covered trucks marked U.S. Army Service Forces. Fuchs dismounts, boots crunching on frozen mud. The smell hits him first, a thick, unmistakable stench of gasoline and oil. For a moment, even the icy air can't hide it. "My God," one of his lieutenants whispers, "it's endless." Before them stretches an ocean of American fuel. Stacks of barrels, hundreds, maybe thousands, lined in perfect military order. Canvas tents, untouched. Jeeps and GMC trucks still loaded with jerry cans. An open trailer bears stenciled words. Property of the U.S. Army Quartermaster Corps, 100-octane aviation fuel. Fuchs removes his glove and touches a drum. It's cold, slick with frost, and full. Within minutes, shouts echo across the depot as German soldiers swarm the site. They rip down American flags, roll out hoses, and begin siphoning precious gasoline into waiting tankers. A sergeant, covered in grime, laughs aloud. 50,000 gallons, maybe more, he yells, voice booming with disbelief. Enough to drive to Paris. But Fuchs doesn't laugh, he just stares. Because even as his men celebrate, he's thinking of what this scene truly means. The Americans could afford to lose this much, 50,000 gallons, and not blink. Their convoys, their depots, their endless columns of trucks, they stretched from Normandy to Antwerp, a river of supply that never ran dry. The colonel turns to his adjutant. "Tell me, Lieutenant," he says quietly, "how many fuel trains have reached us this month?" The adjutant hesitates. "None, Herr Oberst. The Ally bombing. Bombe. Burst destroy." Fuchs nods slowly, staring at the U.S. drums shimmering in the frost. "Then this," he says, "is proof of our defeat. We may drink it, burn it, steal it, but we will never match it." A distant rumble interrupts him, the faint thunder of engines from the west. American reinforcements, perhaps armored. He waves for the men to hurry. For the next hour, the depot erupts into chaos. Engines roaring as tankers fill, barrels loaded onto trucks. The air smells like oil and fear. Then, a radio call crackles through the static. "Enemy armor approaching from Malmedy." Fuchs's eyes narrow. "Leave the rest," he snaps. "Take what you can carry, son, and move." As the first U.S. shells land among the trees, the German convoy lurches forward, leaving behind burning drums and shattered trucks, their brief taste of abundance consumed by fire. Fuchs rides in silence. Outside, the flames rise behind him, lighting the snowy forest in ghostly orange. He says nothing for a long time. Finally he murmurs, almost to himself, "We fight an enemy who wages war with factories, and we with hope." The adjutant looks at him, puzzled. Fuchs doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. The realization is already burning, just like the depot behind them. The convoy crawls through a frozen woodland road, engines rumbling faintly under the snow-heavy canopy. What remains of Colonel Fuchs's Kampfgruppe is battered but alive. Tanks refueled, half-tracks loaded with what gasoline they could seize. Behind them, the black column of smoke from the burning depot still stains the morning sky. Inside the lead half-track, Fuchs sits hunched forward, gloved hands pressed together, eyes distant. Every jolt of the road seems to hammer the same truth deeper into his chest. Germany cannot win this war, not anymore. He had seen Allied strength before, in the skies over France, in the endless trains of supplies after Normandy. But this morning, in that lonely Belgian valley, he saw something more terrifying than bombs or tanks: industrial invincibility. The Americans were not just soldiers, they were an army of machines. He looks at the men around him. Exhausted, hollow-eyed veterans, uniforms stiff with frost and smoke. To them, the captured fuel feels like salvation. To him, it feels like a last meal before the inevitable. 50,000 gallons, he mutters again, barely above the rattle of the engine. And they left it behind, as if it were nothing. His adjutant, Lieutenant Meyer, looks over. "We needed it, sir. Without it, we'd have been finished." Fuchs nods slowly. "Yes, we needed it, but they didn't." The road opens into a valley. Columns of smoke rise in the distance. Villages burning, trucks overturned. The radio squawks endlessly with fragments of chaos. Bridges blown, divisions out of fuel, units cut off by advancing Americans. "Panzer Lehr reports stalled outside Bastogne," Meyer says, scanning a folded map. "No fuel for half their tanks." Fuchs closes his eyes. He can almost picture the scene. Tigers, their monstrous barrels aimed at the horizon, sitting uselessly by the roadside, engines silent. War machines without blood. When Hitler launched Wacht am Rhein, the so-called Ardennes offensive, it was supposed to be a masterstroke. Strike through the Ardennes, split the Allied line, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. But from the start, men like Fuchs had known the flaw. They didn't have the fuel to reach the Meuse, let alone Antwerp. And now, sitting on stolen American gasoline, he feels the full absurdity of it all. The colonel's thoughts drift back to the depot, to the endless rows of drums, the neatly parked trucks, the vastness of it. That wasn't luck. That was infrastructure, something Germany no longer had. The Reich's refineries were ruins. Synthetic fuel plants bombed to rubble. Convoys shattered by Allied fighter bombers. The mighty Panzers had become hungry beasts chained to empty barrels. Fuchs leans toward Meyer. "Tell me, Lieutenant, when this war began, what did you believe?" Meyer hesitates. That we would build a new Europe, that our technology, our tanks, our discipline would conquer chaos. "And now?" Fuchs asks quietly. The young officer looks down at his hands. "Now, I believe, we underestimated them. The Americans. They build faster than we can destroy." A silence settles in the cabin. Outside, snow begins to fall again. Thick, slow flakes drifting through the air. They pass an abandoned Panther tank, its hull frozen, tracks half buried in snow. A single dead crewman lies beside it, still clutching an empty jerry can. Meyer stares out the window. "That could have been us." "It will be," Fuchs says simply. "Soon enough." As night falls, the convoy halts in a forest clearing. Men build small fires, warming their hands, whispering about the depot. How rich the Americans must be, how vast their supplies, how strange it feels to envy the enemy. Fuchs walks alone into the trees, snow crunching under his boots. He looks back at the flickering firelight and thinks of Berlin, of speeches, parades, and promises now buried under rubble. He exhales slowly, white breath drifting into the night. For the first time in years, he feels no hatred for the enemy, only awe. 50,000 gallons, he says softly to the darkness, and they didn't even notice it was gone. In the distance, artillery thunders again, low, rhythmic, endless. The sound of a machine that never sleeps. Snow muffles the forest, a heavy gray silence broken only by the whine of idling engines and the crack of frozen branches under boots. The Ardennes is choking on its own cold, smoke, ice and psychos and dying machinery. Colonel Fuchs stands beside his command car, binoculars raised, scanning the white expanse beyond the tree line. The last of his Panthers are spread across a shallow ridge, their barrels frosted, engines sputtering in protest. The stolen American fuel is nearly gone. What little remains sits sloshing in jerry cans, guarded like gold. An NCO trudges through the snow toward him, helmet crusted with ice. "Herr Oberst, message from Corps HQ. We're to hold this sector until relief from the 2nd Panzer Division arrives." Fuchs lowers the binoculars slowly. "And when will that be?" The man hesitates. "They're out of fuel, sir. Half their armor is stationary near St. Vith." For a long moment, Fuchs doesn't speak. He just stares at the horizon. A thin smear of gray where the clouds meet the smoke of 1,000 burning vehicles. The plan, the great counteroffensive, is unraveling. Not because of enemy brilliance, but because every tank, every half-track, every truck in the German army is dying of starvation. "Tell the men to dig in," he says finally. "We'll hold until the fuel or the snow runs out, whichever comes first." The NCO nods and trudges away. Fuchs leans against the fender of his car, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. The wind stings his face. He thinks again of that depot. Rows of drums gleaming under the sun, enough fuel to move an army for weeks. The Americans had oceans of the stuff. Germany had puddles. He remembers his years on the Eastern Front, the freezing marches, the burned-out tanks abandoned by the roadside, the desperate scrounging for a few liters of gasoline. The men fought like lions, but lions still die without food. "Sir," Meyer says, approaching with a clipboard. "Reports from the outpost. Movement to the west. American armor, likely a patrol." Fuchs stares into the distance. The air trembles faintly with the rumble of engines. "Not yet," he mutters. "Let them come. We'll make them spend their fuel to reach us." The irony isn't lost on him. An hour later, the shelling begins. Sharp cracks echoing through the forest, geysers of snow erupting among the trees. The men scramble for cover, rifles and MG-42s set up along the ridgeline. Fuchs ducks into the trench, shouting orders over the chaos. Tracer fire slices through the air. The roar of Sherman tanks grows louder, steady, confident, endless. Meyer crouches beside him. "They just keep coming." "They can afford to," Fuchs answers grimly. "For every tank we destroy, they build 10 more. A nearby explosion rocks the trench. Dirt showers down. The men huddle closer, smoke and fear thicken the air. Through the haze, Fuchs glimpses a sight both magnificent and horrifying. A line of Shermans rolling forward, engines rumbling like a heartbeat, each one marked with white stars. Behind them stretch columns of trucks, ammunition, food, fuel, a machine that never stops moving. For a moment, it doesn't even feel like a battle. It feels like a demonstration, of scale, of power, of inevitability. Fuchs lowers his binoculars and exhales slowly. "So this is how it ends," he murmurs. "Not with courage or cunning, but with numbers." By dusk, the ridge is lost. Fuchs's remaining armor burns in the snow, black smoke rising into the frozen sky. The surviving men retreat through the woods, exhausted, dragging wounded comrades on makeshift sleds. Behind them, the American column moves forward, neat, relentless, refueling on the move. Trucks peel off to supply tanks, tankers refill depots, mechanics replace engines. The machine feeds itself, devouring distance, indifferent to weather or fatigue. Fuchs stops once more at the edge of a clearing and looks back. The glow of burning fuel drums lights the night like candles on a dying altar. He whispers under his breath, barely audible through the wind, "God help the world that fights a nation of factories." And with that, he turns away, disappearing into the darkness with what remains of his men, another broken fragment of a once proud army that had just witnessed its doom, not by defeat in battle, but by the sheer weight of production. The snow has stopped falling, but the silence that follows is worse. It's the kind of quiet that settles after a defeat. Heavy, patient, absolute. The Ardennes offensive, Hitler's last gamble, has bled itself dry. The great counterattack that was meant to split the Allies and force peace has turned into a frozen graveyard of tanks, men, and ambition. Colonel Fuchs sits beside a field stove in a commandeered farmhouse, its windows shattered, its walls scorched by gunfire. The glow of the flame paints his face in tired orange light. His uniform, once immaculate, is stiff with dirt and frost. Outside, the road to the west is clogged with retreating vehicles, trucks with empty fuel drums, horses pulling artillery pieces because the engines have died, soldiers trudging silently through the slush. It's not an army anymore. It's an exodus. Meyer enters quietly, a sheaf of papers in hand. "Herr Oberst," he says, "the Americans are pushing east. Reports say Patton's Third Army is already across the Sauer River." Fuchs nods absently, staring at the stove. "And our reserves?" "Gone," Meyer replies. "We have orders to withdraw behind the Rhine." For a long moment, neither man speaks. The only sound is the faint sputter of the fire and the distant rumble of artillery. Fuchs finally breaks the silence. "Do you remember the depot, Meyer? The one near Stavelot?" Meyer frowns. "Of course, the fuel we captured." "Yes," Fuchs says slowly. "We celebrated, remember? We thought it meant hope, but I saw it differently. I saw it for what it was, a glimpse into the scale of the enemy." He looks up, eyes hollow but lucid. "They had more fuel in that one depot than we could move in an entire campaign. Every drum, every can, delivered on time, guarded, accounted for. Their logistics don't bend. They don't break." Meyer sits down across from him. "Maybe it doesn't matter. Even with their fuel, even with their numbers, they still bleed like we do." Fuchs shakes his head. "You don't understand. They've built something we never could. Not just an army, but a system that feeds itself. Trains, trucks, ships, factories, all synchronized. You destroy one depot and 10 more appear. You burn one tank and they ship another across the ocean." He stares at the wall, voice quiet. "We never stood a chance after 1942. We were fighting an empire of machines." Meyer doesn't argue. He just watches the colonel, his face lit by the flickering stove, the firelight reflecting in his weary eyes. Outside, a soldier bursts through the door, breathless. "Herr Oberst! American armor spotted on the main road, about 5 kilometers west." Fuchs rises slowly, pulling on his greatcoat. "Tell the men to prepare to move. Leave the heavy equipment. We can't afford to drag it." As the soldier runs off, Fuchs pauses by the window. Through the cracks in the boarded glass, he sees headlights flickering in the distance. Not the sharp beams of Panzers, but the wide, steady glow of Sherman tanks. They move like a tide, unhurried, unstoppable. He turns to Meyer. "We'll pull back to Prüm, then toward Bitburg. After that—" He stops, then exhales. "After that, we survive. That's all that's left." They leave the farmhouse as the first shells whistle overhead. Snow erupts along the road, sending men diving for cover. The column begins to move again. A ghost army retreating through the ruins of a dream. As dawn creeps over the horizon, Fuchs looks back once more. The Americans are coming. Engines growling, their tanks still full, their convoys endless. Behind them stretch supply lines that reach all the way to the factories of Detroit and the oil fields of Texas. And in that moment, Fuchs understands completely. The war was never lost in the forests of Belgium or the plains of France. It was lost in the balance sheets, in the assembly lines, in the quiet efficiency of an industrial giant that could turn raw material into firepower faster than any empire in history. The Battle of the Bulge was over. But for men like him, the realization had only just begun. He climbs onto the back of a truck, the engine sputtering to life with its last drops of gasoline. The column lurches forward, disappearing into the fog. A defeated army running on fumes, chased by a machine that would never run dry. As the truck rattles over the icy road, Meyer breaks the silence. "Do you think they'll stop?" Fuchs looks out over the misty forest. "No," he says quietly. "They'll keep moving until the world runs on their engines." He doesn't mean it as bitterness, only as truth. The war for him is over, but in the echo of tank treads and the hum of convoys, he hears the sound of the century to come.